Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello, everybody. Thank you. My name's Bruce Fenton, and I'm a longtime fan of this place. I've been coming here for 22 years, and I've been in Bitcoin for, I guess, about 13 years, so quite a while. So I'll just go ahead and have you folks introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and that'll give us a start off, and we'll talk a little bit about Bitcoin in UAE.
Hey everyone, this is Odey. I am the CEO and founder of Zawda, and we're helping people preserve their wealth through multi-sig custody in the Middle East and North Africa.
My name is Abdulla Aldhaheri. I'm the CEO of the Blockchain Center in Abu Dhabi, and we're building the ecosystem here in Abu Dhabi specifically and growing from many perspectives.
Hi everyone, Basil Al Askari, founder and CEO of MidChains. MidChains is a regulated digital asset exchange and custody business in ADGM.
Awesome. So we've certainly seen, I think there's a lot of parallels between the UAE and this industry. You know, both have gone through incredible growth and incredible change over the last, I mean, Bitcoin wasn't really around more than, 14 years ago, but over the last 20 years, UAE and especially has gone through change. But over the last decade, both industries have changed a lot. Maybe you could each tell a little bit about what your perspective has been on, what the change has been and what you've been most excited about, and what is most striking to you over the last decade in how this ecosystem has evolved, both the country and Bitcoin and Bitcoin and the country together.
From my opinion, I live in Egypt right now. I'm originally from Lebanon, and I've seen the UAE evolve so much over the past 20 years. I lived here in the early 2000s, in the early 2010s, and now I'm visiting again, and the transformation has been nothing short of incredible. Just in that generational time span, to see all that transformation happen in the region. And to kind of parallel that with what's happening in Bitcoin and the digital assets ecosystem, the fact that over the past 5 years you've seen all these companies move here, all that regulation come in across the different Emirates, from Dubai to Abu Dhabi to Ras Al Khaimah, with other countries in the region following through. That just testifies and shows you the vision and the willingness to kind of like attract that talent to be kind of pioneers in that industry.
From my perspective, there has been a huge change. First of all, the UAE has been always the first when it comes to adoption of this technology of cryptocurrencies back in the days. And I think Basil knows more, but early days when ADGM started their regulatory framework, how early they were, especially during the time of when OneCoin happened and all of those aspects. So the big changes that we see right now has been that there is more clarity, there is more adoption in this region, and the vision is now wider than how it was before. What we see from this perspective is that we see sovereign funds or institutions or exchanges or many people moving into this region as what we see like the early days of Silicon Valley and how they were to become. So these are the major changes that I see here in this region. Like I said, more clarity, there is more knowledge, both to what you said, Bruce, like when it comes from the institution side, from the regulator side, and also from individuals right now. I know a lot of people, their parents started getting into this and asking about these things. So back a couple of years ago, nobody knew what's these things. And you said it yourself, Bruce, you came here for 22 years. I know a couple of years ago, people used to tell you if I don't touch it, I'm not going to take it. Now people understand it more and look at it from a different perspective.
So I'm going to keep my conversation a little bit out of the regulatory discussion, because I think it's very clear to everyone that it is regulated here and everything's becoming much more clear, as the panelists have mentioned. But on a personal note, when I started looking at the space in 2017, I used to work in Mubadala, one of the larger sovereign wealth funds here, and I had pitched the idea of doing crypto investments internally. At that point, people thought I was completely insane. They said, go do that on your own time. So I did. Here we are. We have them on the cap table. A lot of the sovereign funds are discussing, looking at the asset class extremely seriously. And I think that's because we've elevated it to the level where they can. And it's taken a long time to get here, but I'm glad we're here.
Amazing. So this week is special for me because it's the 11th anniversary. So 11 years ago this week, just a couple days ago, it was December 7th, 11 years ago, we did the very first crypto or Bitcoin event ever in UAE, and that was the Dubai Bitcoin conference in Dubai. And a lot of folks who are here, like Dr. Marwan, were there, and people who are still in the industry, and it's been very exciting. And I think one of the things that was striking back then, and I think has, and now, so we went from, that event, which was, I think 70 people or so came to that event. And, now we have this, and there's events like this quite regularly. There's very, very large events. And as you mentioned, there's sovereign funds that have come aboard. And there's something like 50,000 entrepreneurs involved in this space in some way or another in this country. And, thousands and thousands of people, a lot of the very, very serious, members of the industry that have come here. And I think one thing that's been striking about that is the what the government has done to be welcoming. And especially, unfortunately, with the U.S. had a period recently, and I hope it's changing. I think it's radically going to change with the new administration. But, we had a period where we weren't super friendly to it. But the government here has been particularly welcoming, not just to Bitcoin and crypto, but to industry in general. And I think it's been, one of the reasons that there's been so much success. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on, what do you think the success has been from, and particularly, what do you think that the government has done right in this to help contribute to this incredible growth that we've seen in this industry?
It's really hard to kind of capture all of that, but what it really comes down to is a lot of planning, strategic decisions that have compounded over a long period of time quite well. And in terms of the data, that speaks for itself of where the UAE stands today amongst its regional peers and globally. Whereas 20 years ago, what was the kind of like volume of people that would come to UAE for conferences versus today across different industries? When you look at digital asset and Bitcoin adoption, UAE has the highest per capita around the world. All of these things within that industry and globally have been a result of them having that vision and willing to invest, take those risks, and really pioneer what that's going to look like. And I think we can see the kind of like results of it now clearly.
From my perspective, us as a startup, a couple of months ago, people used to say, okay, what are you going to do? Are there government support? Are they going to push you guys to do multiple things? Look, in a couple of months, what we achieved with leadership support, government support, private sector support was huge. I think the guys here know, the people who used to look at us and say, a couple of young kids running with $100 million fund, what are they going to do, and all of these things. Yes, we did that. It was an idea early days, but right now we exceeded what people expected from ourselves. Now, again, when it comes to discussing regulatory types of aspects, when we sit with them and we say, look, we feel that, or we see regulations changing from this perspective, or let's add this aspect, they were very welcoming. No one used to say, like I said, early days when you say, look at these bunch of kids there, what are they doing? No, they were very opening, very welcoming, and many things happened from that. Us meeting with big institutions, whether it's from exchanges or from sovereign funds or from big institutions, the way they look at what we do here in this region, which all comes back to one thing. No one is ever going to stop innovation in the UAE, and they always are going to continue supporting the youth.
I think for the first time since I've been in the space, we're starting to see easing from the banking sector. And I think this is a huge development for on-ramping new participants into the market. You have a perfect storm where there's a population of mostly expats and mostly young people around the age of 30. And that's the right demographic to be looking at the asset class and its potential applications beyond just investments, but also for things like payments, for things like essentially record keeping and many other applications that we haven't even thought of yet. And I think the environment is favorable to experimentation at that level, which is going to allow us to have a lot more innovation that happens here for international markets.
Awesome. the timing of this is particularly amazing because we have the new pro Bitcoin administration in the United States. We have much more global interest. We have obviously the price. We passed these big thresholds recently with this big rise. There's a lot to be excited about, and it seems like, I was walking in with one of the hosts of this event this morning, and I said, "Boy, you sure did get the right timing for this." These events are planned quite a bit ahead of time. David was originally David Bailey, the host of this, was originally talking about this when he came to my event, the Satoshi Roundtable, I think 2 years ago. He says, "Yeah, I'd like to do an event in UAE. Let's," it takes a while, especially something of such a scale. So the timing ended up working out, kind of coincidentally perfect. And there's a lot to be excited about. I'd love to hear, what are you most excited about over the next 1 to 5 years about this space and particularly this country, and what do you see happening?
As an early stage startup, obviously we're excited to get more customers and users in this space, specifically like Bitcoin adoption, seeing that kind of like become more mainstream, not only in the UAE, but across the region itself. The second aspect would be a lot of the pro-banking regulation that's starting to spread. So a lot of the central banks, a lot of the institutions, a lot of the big players in this space that have the funds, whether they're banks or whether they're investment banks, willing to allocate time to the space. That for us is going to help make this scale up a lot better. And the last thing I think is just comes down to like Bitcoin's core ethos, which is it's very neutral. So anyone can make of Bitcoin what they want out of it. So whether you want to use it as kind of a hedge against inflation, whether you want to use it as a risk-on asset to kind of diversify, whether you want to use it as a way to store your wealth, there are all these different ways that you can start applying Bitcoin and using it. And so I think the region is just starting to scratch that surface.
From my perspective is we're going to see a lot of things. Let's talk on Bitcoin-related things. We are going to start seeing adoption from lending, borrowing, collateralizing. Who knows? I know one of the hottest topic today in this event is using Bitcoin as a Federal Reserve. Everybody is looking at this. Everybody's talking about it. It might happen. It might not. So people are going to start looking at Bitcoin itself. As I was saying today, Bitcoin is not a digital currency. It's something more than that of how people are going to start using. So that's the type of things I see changing in this region, and what will people do. As I said, if it goes as to be a Federal Reserve and people start using it instead of gold, that's something big. At least I know I went in the right path when I was young.
I want to spend a minute to talk about the institutional use case. So at MidChains, we essentially had this thesis to build a business that was for institutions to either make investments or utilize us as a payment and remittance service in some shape or form. 7 years ago, when we presented this idea, it seemed like it was a million years away from essentially reaching a point where institutions could actually get confident in the compliance of an institution in this space. And we are finally here. So from this year, we've seen institutional adoption skyrocket internationally, but also locally. And that is a great place to be.
Awesome. So we talked about a lot of all the positives. I'm wondering if there's anything that you can think of that you think can be improved upon, or anything that you're worried about, or anything that you think could be better. And I'll start on that. The one thing that I always think can be improved upon, as I've seen this space grow so much, is one thing I miss is kind of that original cypherpunk feeling. It's wonderful to make money, and many of us have been very, very blessed by this. But I sometimes miss the early days when it wasn't so much about the money. It was more about a revolution that will make the world better for people. So for me, that would be one thing I would like to improve upon, is go back to that original, more kind of cypherpunk roots and that rebellious spirit. But I'd love to hear from each of you about what do you think could be improved upon, or is there anything that you're worried about, or if there's something that you could really do to move the industry forward or improve it in some way, what would that be?
Sure. Interesting comparing like the UAE, the region here, to the United States. I think in the United States, there's a very clear distinction today between Bitcoin and the other digital assets and crypto classes. I don't think here there is still that distinction. There is still that discussion around what are the other altcoins, what are digital assets, NFTs. Like I think there is still that close tie, like we're associating Bitcoin with the rest of crypto, whereas for many adopters in the US, that's kind of like been decoupled. And Bitcoin has become its own asset class that is being used by ETFs, that is being used and tokenized in different ways. So what I would like to see is just how can we start making that distinction and kind of valuing Bitcoin for what it stands for and like putting all the assets classes in that category separately.
One thing I would like to say is knowledge. Having the knowledge to understanding what people can achieve using this technology and taking risks. Like a lot of things, like a lot of countries right now or other jurisdictions are lacking of doing a big major things because no one wants to take the first risk into these things. I do agree with you in like early days people had that cypherpunk feeling and all of that because people used to take risks. They started like, as a white paper in 2008 and then small enthusiasts came and pushed it to what it is today, so someone has to take that risk as a start and everything was basically going to follow along with it.
Bruce, I'm with you on the original feeling of the industry, that cypherpunk feeling. I think that really speaks to fostering innovation and creativity, which feels like it's kind of tapered off a little bit. So I hope that returns. Speaking of other challenge areas or risks that I potentially see, one thing that concerns me is that with prosperous times, we'll see a resurgence of potentially scammer or illegal behavior. And this genuinely worries me because when something goes wrong, all of us get hurt.
Yeah, great point. To your point about education, education has always been something important in this. I mean, in the original days, we had to do tons of education about, what this is, and that still continues now. And we're still sort of early stages. There's some people, older generations still, who just have absolutely no clue. There's very wealthy people who still don't know very much about this asset. If you had a ability to magically reach millions of people, what would you say, and what is the most important thing that you think, particularly about this part of the world, what do you think is the most important thing that you would try and educate people about?
Well, education can kind of come in leaps and bounds, and with something like Bitcoin, it's about kind of like breaking it down and making something that is unfamiliar sound very familiar. And it's for any startup, it's the same problem. It's like you're working on something that might not be on people's radar, something that might be a pain point, and you're trying to sell like this is something worth investing in and starting a company for, so you can solve that for them. In terms of like education, what I would like to see, if we had a magic wand, is understanding the value of storing this quite safely. What we've seen over the past year in this industry is the bad actors. What we've seen is also the central banks and the inflation. What we've seen is how a lot of people keep getting hacked or losing their Bitcoin. And I think this is wealth that shouldn't go and disappear that way. So trying to really dilute that and make it very familiar, make them understand like what it would take and what are the kind of few simple steps that you can do, and creating products that can do that would be very helpful.
For me, myself, I see pushing education at a younger age in schools and universities right now. That's what I would like to see from an education perspective, to what you said about having people understanding, how to hold these things, how to store them, not getting hacked, understanding what blockchain and crypto is, what are the use cases for it and all of that. So we need to see a big push from schools and universities into this perspective, and that's how people are going to understand it more and get educated about it. Otherwise, yes, all of us here collectively can start pushing and explaining this to people, but till when? I always ask, till when are you guys going to start pushing these things someone has to come and, again, taking risks.
I agree with all my panelists on the points regarding education, especially at the younger ages. Especially for the older ages, though, I'll add to the conversation regarding, I think, explaining and educating how people can assess service providers and how to utilize those service providers best to gain access to the different markets as well as the different services in our industry. And I think that's incredibly important to help them avoid being scammed. Now, getting scammed happens all the time with regards to even the securities market still today, but I think there's a lot more resources that are readily available and tailored to an older generation that makes it accessible for them to educate themselves. I think that's missing quite a bit from our industry, and I think finally we have attention of decision makers at senior levels, and we shouldn't ignore that.
That's great. You know, we mentioned hacks and theft a couple times, and so I'd like to ask about what you see as the best solution to that. Education is definitely part of it. When it comes to regulation, there's sort of a variance of two schools of thought. I'm personally on more of the side of letting the markets do it. I think the markets make a great regulator. In the United States, we saw the ICO wave, a lot of low-quality projects, and it was actually the market that fixed it. The regulators didn't come in until many, many years later. And there's a big balance, and there's a debate in the UAE, as there is with every country, about how much regulation is the right amount. In the U.S., we've seen over the last few years we had too much, and people don't. A lot of I'm sure many in the audience have seen investment prospectuses that say available everywhere except the United States, and that's not a good place to be. But then, typically you have countries where they maybe start out more free and then they add more and more regulation and then they become just like the more regulated countries. What do you see as the best way to solve things like hacking and theft? Are you more on the free market side or more on the regulation side or somewhere in between?
Educate yourself for sure. From a personal experience, I went through the 2019 Lebanese banking crisis where myself, my families, and most people in Lebanon lost all of their savings. And you had regulation, and you had a central bank, and it was still a system that was a once-in-a-century event. I would say just educate yourself, understand what are the risks that you're taking, understand the jurisdictions that you're in, understand that you're putting your wealth into an asset class. Don't just invest in it because someone told you about it or you heard it in the hallway. Try to understand when you're putting your money into something that this is a vehicle to preserve value and wealth over time. And so you want to put it into something, understand whether it's art, whether it is Bitcoin, whether it is equities. Choose your asset class and then invest yourself in it. Because if you don't do that due diligence, you're always going to end up on the wrong side of things and you might have, you'll be like rug pulled.
I'd go with the open markets model, and not to sound rebellion here, but having an open market allows more innovation to come in, and considering it like a sandbox, type of style. So let people build. Still, I do support regulations in many constants, and people always ask me, like, what's my stance on it? And I do see there is a need for regulations, but people should treat it such as a computer, like you can build more apps on it with the coming years until there is actually a full understanding of these things.
So as an operator in this space, I've got some experience with very, I would say, restrictive regulation versus open markets. And like yourself, Bruce, I'm a big fan of the open market regulatory model. However, I would say it's still important for us to conform in a way where we are creating a safe environment for participants to come in different aspects. Now, that shouldn't necessarily be telling them how to invest, but for us to have a process and a procedure that is consistent and that can deliver the service as opposed to necessarily delivering a promise of returns that is not our place. That is the investor's place to determine on their own.
Awesome. Well, that's about time for us. I really appreciate the panel. I think that was great, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well. So let's give our panelists a big hand, and thank you very, very much.
Is your company ready for the next evolution in financial strategy? Bitcoin for Corporations is your partner in securing the future of your business. With exclusive membership benefits, our comprehensive masterclass, and a network of trusted service providers, we provide the insights and resources to help you incorporate Bitcoin into your financial strategy, ensuring stability and long-term value. Strengthen your business. Innovate with confidence. Bitcoin for Corporations, protecting your treasury and positioning you for the future.